Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Boys, Season 5, Episode 8. It's called Blood and Bone, and more importantly, it is the finale. Not the season finale, well it is the season finale, but it's also the series finale. This is it, it's over, this is the end, and it's kind of been a rough ride, get into the final episode. This season's been a lot of wheel spinning, a lot of MacGuffin chasing, a lot of Soldier Boy stuff that has very little to do with this final episode and is more about setting up a spin-off that's coming. And that's all been very frustrating. That's been piling up over the course of the season. And the momentum getting to this episode was not particularly great. So, expectations, I think, for myself at least, and it seems like a lot of people in general, was pretty lukewarm getting into the final episode. So, but obviously you hope that they're going to pull it out and they're going to do something kind of special. Maybe they didn't really have enough juice for a full final season, but they did have something good planned for the ending. And the thing is that this, it crosses some T's and it dots some I's that it should be doing. It's kind of doing the bare minimum of what would constitute an end to this story. But I don't think it's particularly exciting or particularly a good ending. It feels like once again it's just them going on another excursion. It just happens to be for the final battle this time, and because every episode's been let's go do a thing at a location, which I know sounds like a very generic thing to say, but it really does feel like almost every episode let's go to this one building and we'll try and accomplish this one thing. It just so happens that this time it's, and the plan is to actually take down Homelander this time. And also the MacGuffin, the Hail Mary of now Chemical might have Soldier Boy's powers, that just worked. Like, in one episode that worked. We spent all season doing all this V1 stuff, doing all this stuff with the virus, and while the virus does come up in a sense, after Homelander's already defeated, the V1 stuff feels like a giant waste of goddamn time now that we're actually at the end of the show. What did it do? What did it accomplish? The only thing you could argue is just make Homelander think he's more unstoppable, but did anything really change after he got the V1? It was such this big ending to episode 6. He's now got the V1, he's now unstoppable, but his behavior didn't really change. He was already doing his whole I'm God thing before that. Nothing substantially felt different about him after that point. It didn't really factor into anything, and the whole plan to depower him and then we can take him out because he's a normal human now, that would have been the exact same with or without the V1. In fact, it's what they tried to do at the end of season 3 with Soldier Boy. And to be honest, the thing that was really getting me about a lot of this episode is how much of it wouldn't have to change if you just did it at the end of season 3, right? Because the stuff that I think most people are going to enjoy to some extent is the Homelander defeat, right? It's the moment after he's been depowered where he grovels, where he's sniveling, he's begging, and he's pathetic. And Butcher just beats the shit out of him, because Homelander's never been in a real fight. He's never had to fight without powers before. He doesn't know how to do it. Butcher just beats the shit out of him and then kills him, right? I think most people are going to find that couple of minutes very satisfying, because it's effectively what they've been looking forward to for 5 seasons at this point. But that exact 2 minutes, if you just had the Soldier Boy plan work in the season 3 finale, and then have almost that exact same 2 minutes happen just in that location instead, it would have been not even just as good. It probably would have been more effective, because I wouldn't have had such a downer feeling at the episode. I was still enjoying the show a lot in season 3. It really does feel like everything since then has ultimately felt like a little bit of a just a little bit like just an exercise in continuing the show. Is because not much, like, it's not that there's not been good things since then or good characters they've introduced since then. I've enjoyed some of the new characters that have come up since then and so on, but it just, I don't know. The V1 just amounted to nothing and had no real impact on anything in this final episode, to the point where I don't even think it's mentioned once. It does not matter that he's got the V1 at all. It had no effect. And, it's funny, last episode I got really frustrated and made fun of the moment where the Deep walks in and starts to apologize about Black Noir. Hey, because he killed Black Noir, and Homelander just sort of hand waves it and says, "Doesn't matter." And I kind of made fun of that because it was like, yeah, you're right, that plot line does not matter, and it feels completely like a waste of time. Funnily enough, the same thing, not the exact same way, but the same thing almost kind of happens with Soldier Boy this episode. Homelander goes to speak to Ryan, and Soldier Boy comes up, and Homelander says, he doesn't matter. And I burst out laughing when he said that, because it was basically the same thing I reacted to last episode, because he's right. He doesn't matter. Everything Soldier Boy did this season, and we spent a lot of the season on Soldier Boy, did not matter. He that's the only mention he gets this entire episode, is that one moment. He does not matter in the grand scheme of how this ending played out in any way, shape, or form. It's actually wild how irrelevant it is, and how much of it was just setting up and reminding everyone about the prequel, and this is what Clara would have wanted, or whatever. I'm almost surprised, because obviously Butcher says this is for Becca at one point before he kills Homelander. I'm almost surprised he didn't phrase it the exact same way. This is what Becca would have wanted. So, I mean, yeah, like, everything to do with the V1 and everything to do with Soldier Boy this season was a big fat waste of time. And, like, obviously the only thing you could really say is that the V1 made Homelander more emboldened. In theory, sure, but, like, what evidence did we actually see of that emboldenment? If anything, he feels neutered compared to earlier seasons, and that maybe feels more of a budget thing than it does like a writing thing. Like, oh, we can't do as many crazy things because we're saving money. And that's the other thing about the climax is, while I find some of the aftermath of the climax, you know, Homelander sniveling, being pathetic, it never leaves the Oval Office, and I guess they would argue there's like some symbolism in that, but it also feels very, very small. It feels very, very low budget in a lot of ways. Like, the powers themselves look fine for what they are, but, like, it does kind of feel like everything this season has been very, very, even more contained than normal. And I don't know if that's just because the actors are, like, costing more as times go on. Maybe they didn't have locked contracts in season 1 or whatever, so they've got less money for effects, or Amazon's tightening the belt, or whatever it is. But it kind of feels like, because the assumption before this episode, because it did feel like there was a bit less money being spent on a lot of the season, the assumption perhaps was, well, they want to have a big showdown, they're saving a lot of their money for the finale, because we've seen TV shows do that in the past, where the season feels a little cheap, but then you get to the big finale in the final season, and it kind of feels like, oh, okay, they were saving their money so they could do something special here at the end. But I don't really feel that at all. Like, they go through some tunnels, they end up in their Oval Office set, which we've had, you know, throughout most of the season at this point. A big showdown between Billy and Butcher happens in the Seven's office, or their meeting room, right? That's like a and otherwise we're at like a farmhouse and some other sort of generic locations. There's nothing special about the fight from like an action point of view. It's really just some typical grab, tentacles, fly away, laser eyes, you know, the same old shtick that we've kind of been seeing. Nothing about it felt all that big, and it's really just trying to keep Homelander busy until Kimiko was able to power up, which, you know, she gets angry. Sage intentionally pisses her off to kind of prove that the Soldier Boy power attempt has worked, because she blasts off the Soldier Boy power and it makes Sage dumb. She's not smart anymore. So she goes off to Harry Potter land, which sounds about right. No offense to Harry Potter fans. Well, maybe a little bit of offense. Yeah, so, like, okay, right, that's fine. I appreciate giving Kimiko an important role to play in taking down Homelander. I do like that. I like that none of this would have been possible without her, because it kind of shows some of Butcher's, you know, it shines a light on his you know, bigotry a little bit, that he wouldn't have been able to take down. I mean, also he became a sup himself as well, that's obviously an important thing, but the idea that the very first character that the others said, hey, let's take her in and not treat her like an enemy, and he was obviously very dubious about that. I like that she turned out to be important in taking Homelander down after all this time. But ultimately, my feeling here is that very little progressed in terms of the character arcs from the end of season 3 till now. Like, I don't know if anything that's significant, and if anything, it feels like we kind of just made up some extra drama with Butcher turning to this dark side. You know, we didn't really need to do that. Honestly, we could have just got to like all the things he does here pretty much without like anything that we've done in the last 2 seasons. I think another good example of like some of these things just kind of being like waiting to happen and not actually being built to over the last couple of seasons is Annie in the Deep. Because if you'd said to me at any point over the course of this show, who's going to take down the Deep in the final episode of The Boys, assuming that he makes it to then, which he did, I'd be like, well, it's going to be Starlight, right? It's going to be like a bookend because of how their story started back in the very first episode of the show. It's the most obvious thing in the world. But it does it in such a... And this kind of goes for a lot of the things that this episode does. It does it in the kind of the most just conveniently lazy way possible, where it's just they're in the White House and they stumble into the Deep, and Annie's like, okay, I've got him, right? And then she's just sort of dealing with the Deep while the others are all dealing with Homelander, and that's it. That's the whole thing. Like, I don't know if the Deep or Annie have mentioned each other that much this season at all. It doesn't really feel like we set up for this in any great way to sort of bring back that original conflict. It's just kind of something they, you know, she just runs into him in the course of the mission at the end, in the ending, and that's it. And that's all it takes to get there. And it feels like this episode does all the things it is supposed to do, but it does them, like I said, kind of in the laziest, most simplest way possible, without really feeling like it adds anything to the overall. You know, it feels like, I don't want to say it feels like fan fiction, but it very much feels like if someone just made a list of things that kind of need to happen at the end and just sort of went down a checklist, that's kind of all this really is. It doesn't really feel like the ending's saying much, or... And part of that is because they want spin-offs. They've got the prequel, but they also have The Boys Mexico, which I'd forgotten about, which is set after season 5, and they're probably going to bring characters in for that and whatnot. And speaking of spin-offs, the Gen V characters, I mean, I was a fool for thinking that they would at least get to be involved in some kind of fight by the ending. Literally, they have a conversation with them. Emma's there too this time, though, which is nice. It was nice to see at least another one character. But they're basically just told to like drive all of those like survivors from the Homelander screening room to Canada, and that's it. And they leave. That's it. They're gone, and we might never see them again because the show got cancelled. I feel bad for those actors in so many ways. This just feels like such a limp final note to go out on, if this is indeed the final note. Maybe they'll show up in The Boys Mexico. It's entirely possible they will. Maybe they're even planning on that from the get-go or something, and it's not even that bad of news that the show isn't technically coming back because it's getting replaced, but still, it just felt like such a whimper of a like, oh, this is their inclusion. This was it. Okay. The most notable thing that happens is that Starlight apologizes to Marie for being how she was, but she talks about Maeve and how, you know, Maeve was her hero. When she first met her, she was like so, like, she'd given up. She'd like given up so much of herself that she was a shell of her former self. And it was like a whole like stark a wake up to reality. And Marie says, well, that never happened to me. My hero turned out all right, meaning Starlight. So, and that was a kind of a sweet exchange. And it was also nice to bring up Maeve in some way in the final episode. If we're not going to get a cameo, if she's not going to show up and help in some way, then yeah, at least bring her up, okay? Totally fair. I get that. So, all right, fine. All right, that stuff is okay. But like, yeah, the Gen V characters get nothing to do. They just leave. It's such a nothing burger. Frenchie obviously is dead, but that doesn't mean that his impact is not felt in a couple of ways. One, we have the stupid last will and testament, which he's written down just on a bit of paper, and Huey reads it at his quote-unquote funeral, and it's just a long joke about how he's seen everyone's asshole and a description of why he's seen everyone's asshole, and this felt like the crude humor of The Boys, like, coming into a scene where it didn't belong. It was like, can you not just take this part seriously? Can we not just... It was such a lame joke, and it was a long... And that's the problem is not even just that it's a lame joke, because a quick lame joke's whatever, but this was like, you know, it was stretched out over the entire sequence of this, like, asshole running thing. And then we get the Force Ghost, for lack of a better term. We get Kimiko having a vision of him when she's trying to like depower Homelander, and the power's not kicking in. And he's like, the power does not come you know from your hate. That was Soldier Boy's thing. It comes from love, or something to that effect. And that's what eventually gets her to fire her power off, which depowers Homelander and also Butcher and Ryan, because they're both holding Homelander at the time. Yeah, Ryan shows up and stops Homelander from getting away. So that's a thing. So the fight is kind of whatever. The sneaking into the White House is exceptionally easy. They have an excuse for it, I guess, at least, which is that, oh, hey, all those tunnels under the White House, we were there before. We have plans for that area. We can get in there. But it's also a trap. And apparently, it's like, since when is Annie bulletproof? Because basically they get into a trap and these guns start firing on them from up above. And Butcher, like, I think MM, like, dives under Butcher or something like that, which makes sense. But Annie, like, throws down Huey and puts her body over his, and I'm like, is she bulletproof? I don't remember that being... Maybe she is. Maybe she has always been bulletproof, but I didn't think, like, she had that particular ability. I mean, I like the soups protecting the non-soups, I suppose, but it ultimately, this gives Ashley her one big moment, which is that she chooses to go and help them out the trap, right? She goes and opens the door for them, and it's like her one moment of like actually turning on Homelander and having a spine, which someone had to do that in the final episode, I suppose. It's probably the least interesting way they could have done it. It doesn't really feel like a big dramatic moment when she does it, and it would also have been nice if she'd actually like said something to Homelander, right? Even if it was after he was depowered, where she just told him to go F himself, or I don't know, something like that. It's but that gets them into the White House, and it's funny though, because like Butcher comes in and they reference that conversation they had seasons ago about Scorched Earth. That scene with Butcher and Homelander talking about how their fight's going to end, and they talk about Scorched Earth and all that, and it's just kind of funny that they never leave the Oval Office, because I'm like, not really scorched earth, maybe scorched carpet, perhaps, is about it. It's a lot more lower stakes, perhaps, than we kind of thought when they said that. Which, and to be fair, given like the implications of how bad Homelander could get, because we've had scenes in the past where, it was a fantasy, it never actually happened. But remember, there was that scene where he was getting frustrated and he pictured himself laser beaming an entire crowd, right, an entire audience. In a moment of frustration. He doesn't actually do it, it snaps back to reality, but we got to see it. And it was like, that's the sort of thing, like, we're kind of expecting. And he does threaten that in his speech. He does say, hey, those who don't believe will be culled, and you'll burn in the fires of hell, or whatever he says. And it's, okay, whatever. Homelander kills a billionaire who wants to, like, make some requests. He just flies him out of space, and that's kind of it. It was amusing. It was an amusing little moment. On its own. But that's really the only thing he does in the episode that's evil to an extent. And even then, it's like a billionaire who's like kind of on his side. So it's not even like you're like, oh, this is some innocent person who didn't deserve to be killed. It's like, yeah, I don't really mind this guy being killed, but it's the only person that Homelander actually hurts in this episode outside of just the fight. So anyway, I mean, what else is there to talk about, really? I mean, yeah, Homelander sniveling is enjoyable, right? He is immediately pathetic. If anything, it does go in maybe a bit quick. It would have been nice if maybe some of the other characters showed up to see some of the sniveling. I know it's on TV because the camera's still beaming it, but it would have been nice, like, before the final moment, if everyone kind of, like, witnessed that moment. All the main characters sort of were in there and got to see that final beat play out. That would have been something, but the entire choreography of all this and the scale of it was very kind of uninspired and felt very disappointing for this is what we've been building up to for 5 seasons, and I think these extra 2 seasons of build up and almost like, well, this better be worth these extra 2 weaker seasons, just didn't ever pay off. If like I say, if the Soldier Boy plan had just worked at the end of season 3 and then we got the same few minutes of him sniveling and Butcher killing him and that was it, that's a wrap, I think that because season 3 was still damn good and I really like season 3, I would have been probably quite satisfied with that. I think these last 2 seasons, And not that there's not been good moments and here or there, and especially in season 4, while I thought it was weaker at the time, still had stuff I liked in it. Season 5 is worse, and as a whole, seasons 4 and 5 do feel like the bridge too far. It was like, we got 3 good seasons, and then things dipped. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of epilogue stuff, of course, because when Homelander dies, there's still quite a bit of time left in the episode. We have Butcher's big thing, of course, with the virus. Although before that, he does try to sort of say to Ryan, hey, we can make a new start. We're both normal humans now. Let's go live somewhere. And Ryan, and I didn't dislike this, actually. I thought this made sense, is that Ryan says, hey, look, I wasn't picking you over Homelander. I was just doing what I thought was right, because Homelander needed to be stopped. But I still think you're a bad person, so, like, I'm not going to, like, we're not going to be this father and son duo. It's not happening. In fact, Ryan ends up sticking with MM, and MM seems to have adopted him by the end of the episode. He's at MM's like new wedding or second wedding with his old wife, and that's like his happy ending. But Butcher goes off to release the virus anyway because he thinks soups have to be called no matter what. Right? There'll just be another Homelander someday. This has to happen, and Huey doesn't tell the others that he's figured this out, that he sees the empty vial. He just runs after Butcher, gets into the Vought building, and he's in the 7 meeting room. And this is kind of like supposed to be the more emotional climax of the show, is finally doing the Butcher and Huey thing. I mean, once again, Huey references the fact that he's the quote-unquote canary. I kind of wish they didn't say that last episode. Like, I think it would have been more impactful if he said it here, and it's the first time I've heard it since I think it was that early season 2 episode where that idea of him being Butcher's canary in the coal mine was brought up. I think because they brought it up to remind us last episode, it felt a lot lamer here when he said it. But you know, he's here to say, hey, you know, I'm your canary, I'm your Lenny, I'm like your brother. I'm here to sort of guide your conscience, and this is wrong what you're doing. You should not do this. And Butcher won't give it up, of course. Butcher, you know, there's a moment, because they actually had to get physical, and he's beating Huey up, and there's a moment where he flashes back to his brother, but that's also the moment where Huey gets his gun and shoots him. And Butcher, when he's sitting there dying, we get his final words, he's like, you know, he lets Huey off the hook for this. He's like, no, I made you do this. I was never going to stop. Like, he kind of acknowledges that. Which, again, I feel like this is just less effective because of Butcher's storyline, particularly this last season. Like, I think season 4 was a bit more interesting because he was softening more and more over the course of that season. He felt more like a normal human being almost by the end of that season, until he turned and went full soup. But I feel like this would have hit a lot harder a season ago, or 2 seasons ago even, just because, again, like, I've not found him the same kind of likable this season. He's just kind of become a bit of a caricature of what he was. So this moment didn't land in quite the same way that I think it maybe should have done for me. So, like, I appreciate the symbolism of having this take place in the Sevens meeting room. It's like, you know, it's a room that these two characters have. I think they were in here once or twice before when they were sneaking about, you know, several seasons ago, but it's not a room they're typically in, right? This is a room that's usually Homelander and his crew that are in, so that at least was a little bit different than normal. But like, it just felt like a little bit, again, underwhelming, a little too late. And you know, from there we get a funeral scene for Butcher. Of course, he's got a C-bomb on his tombstone because of course he does. And they all seem quite chipper about. I mean, not that they're happy he's dead, but they're not like super depressed. They kind of like seem to all accept that this was the way it was always going to go. And Kimiko says goodbye to them all, and that's all she says, but it kind of sounds like goodbye forever, which I guess makes some sense. I don't know if she needs to be goodbye forever, but she goes to France to do what friend she wanted, sitting on a balcony drinking coffee, blah blah blah. MM marries his ex-wife, as we mentioned, and Annie and Huey have opened up the video store, the electronics store that Huey once had back at the start of the show. She's pregnant now, but she's still being a superhero. And it's just kind of a sweet relationship, and which is fine. Like, I had no problem with this epilogue scene. This just made the sense in the world to have it be this. But it did feel a little bit like it did a checklist. It felt like there was a bit of a toothless finale to me. It didn't feel like it had anything particularly surprising in it. And I'm not saying that I want shock value for shock value's sake, but it didn't really feel like they had anything cooking, anything that was like a bit more impactful or spicy. It was kind of just playing out the beats that we would have expected to be played out seasons ago at this point, which just further kind of showed how little these last couple of seasons have really added to the overall drama and character journeys and what's been going on in the show. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess it's funny that that Ashley doesn't want to like leave her presidency after everything goes down, but she immediately gets impeached. Slightly amusing, you know, that was all right. I think the thing for me is that the more the show went on, the more Homelander became more of a direct allegory for the real world, right? Obviously, there was always satire. That was a big part of the show from day one. But it felt like at a certain point he was transitioning from being more of a broad satirical figure to specifically being a parody of, or an allegory for Trump. And I think that might have actually been to the show's detriment in a lot of ways, for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to date things a bit. You know, if you're watching this in 10, 20 years, I don't know how well that's going to land anymore, especially in the back half of the show. But certainly, I think the other problem with that is that it does mean that any solution that fixes everything so we have a happy ending feels too easy, because the real world is not that easy. And it's like, because I was thinking, oh, but there'll still be a bunch of hardcore Homelander followers who sort of form some kind of militia or something and want to try and like kill anyone involved who took out Homelander or whatever. And I get that they tried to like neatly deal with that by having his little final moments be televised and hearing him be scared and hearing him say all the things he said about what he would do to everyone who didn't follow him. Like, they try to give you as much a reason as possible to convince the entire world in the show that, hey, he was a bad guy and no one should mourn him. However, people are so devout in stupidity to a cult of personality type figure that there would still be extremists and there'd still be stuff like that. And that felt a little, again, a bit too easy for me, the way it's just kind of swept, you know, away. There is the one thing which felt like almost a spin-off setup, even though Huey turns it down, which is President Singer's back and he's setting up another like soup division at the FBI and he wants Huey to run it. Huey says no, and he's with Annie instead. He's happy to leave that behind. But I don't think it's an accident they're setting this up. I feel like this is something they're probably going to bring up as a plot point. Maybe eventually some characters will get involved in it. Maybe all the characters from the show will never come back and we'll just have new characters, but this is going to have been a setup in the world for, you know, a new set of characters who can be in The Boys Mexico. Maybe the Gen V characters will join this FBI squad, who knows. But yeah, I mean, it's just very underwhelming, right? Like, I don't think it's not a terrible finale, right? It's not terrible. It goes through all the beats that it needs to hit, but that's it. It doesn't go above and beyond any of those beats, and there's definitely some silly moments, right? Frenchie Force Ghost was just stupid, and I just kind of rolled my eyes when when he stepped into frame and came up to talk to Kimiko. Like, no, stupid moment. Did not like it. Cheesy as hell and very tropey. And it's funny because this show, when it started, was all about making fun of satirizing not just the real world political stuff, but it was about satirizing superheroes and satirizing superhero movies, TV shows, the MCU, all that kind of stuff. And honestly, this last season feels like it's more in line with what all those other things are, just with more swearing and violence. And, you know, that doesn't feel as shocking as it used to. If anything, it just kind of feels like it's playing the greatest hits at times, where it's become kind of a parody of itself, where it's like, oh, we have to have X number of sex jokes, we have to have X number of, exploding heads or whatever. Speaking of, oh father blew up his own head because put a ball gag on him, the titanium ball gag with the Kevlar strap or whatever it was. So it's like, okay, and so it feels like it's going through these motions, and it like I say, it hits the endings for each character that are you relatively would expect, and to be Homelander, it gives some of them a happy ending. A character or two has died along the way. There's just nothing about it that feels particularly inspired or any sort of like kind of hook that feels like a big deal. And I don't even know what finales to compare it to in terms of just how kind of lukewarm it is, but there's definitely others that are like this where it just kind of goes through the motions. Obviously you can't expect every show to be written by like Vince Gilligan or something like that who knows how to like completely just like make all the drama reach the zenith point in the final episode, and that's fine. It was never going to be quite like that, but I think the big thing for me is just how small it felt and how it didn't feel that special. Like the moment that the boys were saying, hey, this is it, this is the mission to go kill Homelander, and we think we have a chance of pulling it off, and because it's the final episode, yeah, there is a good chance they're going to pull it off. This is finally going to be it. It really sticks out to me just how not exciting it was when we had that moment where it's like, hey, one last mission, guys, let's go kill Homelander. It just kind of felt like, yeah, it didn't feel that special. I don't know, and maybe that is just the extra wheels spinning for 2 more seasons that we didn't really need in the grand scheme of things. Honestly, after season 3, you could have basically just done like a 2-hour finale movie and not really like lost much of value, to be honest. And Gen V was a solid show with solid characters. The plots weren't always amazing. I think the ending of season 2 was a little lackluster, and there was definitely some spots here or there that weren't as good. But like when it was focused and when it was them taking down their villain, and Gen V could take down their villain at the end of a season because it wasn't the big Homelander that was supposed to last the entire time. It was a pretty solid, fun show with fun characters. I think for all the flaws that you might have for those Gen V seasons, and there's some definitely in season 2 for sure, I think they're both better than season 4 and 5 of The Boys, although none of it compares to the first 3 seasons of The Boys, so I don't know. Underwhelmed is the best way to put it. It's just, and part of it, of course, is like building up anticipation for 5 seasons. Like we've been building to the how do they finally take down Homelander, and honestly, the response that I feel like I had, and I think a lot of people are going to have, is that's it. That's it. Nothing about it felt big or special or epic in any way, and I'm not even sure I know what I wanted, but that's not my job. That's the writer's job to make you feel like it's the most special fight they've ever had, or if not like in terms of like scale of the fight, but just in terms of like the raw emotion of it. Like, I don't know, again, like I suppose killing Frenchie was supposed to be that, but he's probably the character that would be the least impactful for that, because I don't think Frenchie is that beloved, and honestly, like his romance with Kimiko has been kind of a dud. So I don't know, I think Homelander like killing Huey or something, and that being the final push for both Homelander and Starlight to just go absolute bananas and go for it and try and kill him. And that would be a dark kind of final episode, but it'd have a little bit of bite at least. It would be like, oh, you just did the most horrific thing you could do to this team. You killed the heart of the team. It's time for the fight. It's time to really bring it. And it just doesn't have that moment of like, oh, it's time to get him, right? Where we're excited. It's not built to that naturally over the course of the season. It's just time because it's the final episode, not because the writing has made it feel like we've been ramping up to it the entire time. And I was worried it was going to feel like that, because I said that last episode. I've had a problem with the momentum this entire season, but it just feels like, all right, we're just going out for another mission. That's it. I don't know. The writing this season has been pretty bad. Honestly, the now that we're done, It was clear it was kind of bad in the last few episodes, honestly, but I think now that we're done, like, I feel pretty confident saying I think the writing this season was bad. And I don't know why it declined so much since the first couple seasons, but here we are. Just kind of, a nothing. I guess I didn't mention how the Deep actually died. So Annie doesn't actually try and kill him. Annie's too much of a hero. She's too much of a good person to actually just try and murder him. And I will say, I did, as much as I think the Deep stuff has mostly been a waste of time this season, there is 2 moments in this episode that are pretty decent. But again, much like I said for a lot of the things in this episode, it doesn't need the last 2 seasons to have them work. You could have the exact same scenes with the Deep after season 3, right at the end of season 3, and it would be equally as satisfying and funny. Nothing from these last 2 seasons is really added to it. But when Homelander is just honest about what he thinks of the Deep and calls him pathetic and sniveling and blah blah, and says that the only reason why he's not killed him is because he'd rather him live with the suffering of knowing how pathetic he is, and the Deep's reaction to that was satisfying, right? Also, when Annie's like arguing with him, saying, "Hey, like you've made bad choices, you've done this, you've done that, and you've done it all in the name of Homelander, right? When are you going to just kind of admit that like this is all for nothing and stand up for yourself and blah blah?" And I can't remember what the final line was, but it was basically just grow a spine and admit that you've been wrong. And the way he shrieks out the word no before continuing to fight her did make me laugh, because he is that pathetic, and that was a good moment. But again, you don't need any of these last 2 seasons for that moment to work. The only thing relevant to the fact that anything happened this season with the Deep, and even then, the only thing that mattered was the pipeline thing that was set up last episode, where Samuel L. Jackson shark, right? Apparently, after Deep Blue Sea, Samuel L. Jackson was reincarnated as a shark, and he said, "If you go in this water, we're going to kill you because the fish community hate your guts now, and we're going to murder you." That's the only part that's relevant, because when Annie knocks him into the ocean, thinking that's not a big deal because he's the Deep, right? Swimming's kind of his thing. She doesn't know that she's signing his death warrant, and he gets circled by a bunch of sharks. And of course, just to kind of, I guess, make it like a bookend callback to what he did to Annie in episode 1, he's killed with like the tentacle or whatever coming out of his mouth, so it's kind of phallic. Like, I get it, it's whatever. I guess, like, hey, everyone's going to enjoy the Deep being murdered in a graphic way, so do that. And it's fine. It's kind of, it's like, I was saying, like, I think if this had happened earlier, it'd have had more impact, but it feels like with the Deep, we've been spinning wheels, just like a lot of other plot points and characters, and I really, again, I cannot emphasize enough how much of this season felt like it didn't actually need to be there to get to the end point. It really didn't. So much of it was spent on MacGuffins that didn't even really matter in the end. Nothing significantly had an effect because the V1 finally got to Homelander. It didn't actually give us anything on screen that felt like it changed or justified a change in any real attitude, because the simple fact is Homelander was veering in this direction over the season anyway, and has been for seasons. Like, there's nothing fundamental like result, and even when it happens and Homelander gets the V1 and he fires the beams into the air and all the rest of it, the cliffhanger of that episode was run, he's souped up, he's the worst he's ever been. And then the start of the very next episode was, oh, we got away off camera, and now we're just sort of making a new plan, right? That's again the kind of thing I'm talking about, is that a lot of things in this season have not had a direct consequence of what just happened, and it's made everything feel very kind of hand-wavy and wishy-washy, and like, oh no, we're back to like square one, status quo. Where do we go next to try and steal something to maybe beat Homelander? And it's been that over and over again this season in a really irritating way, and there is nothing special to make this final mission of getting into the White House. It just feels like any other episode where they're going into a building that they're not supposed to be in, and that's it. It's it like I said, it kind of ticks the boxes that it needs to tick, so it's not like a complete disaster, but it's such a shame just how close to mediocre it feels in the grand scheme of things, and how it should feel, how a finale should feel, right? And it's funny because obviously Stranger Things season 5 was the worst season of that show, and it had some good bits in it, but it was overall disappointing. The finale as well felt like the worst finale of any of the seasons, but it did have the good epilogue, right? So there was like things to kind of appreciate. And knowing the boys' final season was coming up, I was like, oh well, hopefully that was a little disappointing. Hopefully the boys is able to do what that show didn't. And it's actually worse. I think this is a worse season, the final season of Stranger Things. That's where I'm at this point. So that sucks. Because you want a finale to be special. You want the ending to be in many ways the best part of a story. You want it to feel satisfying. And I brought up Vince Gilligan because it's been a few years now, but I still remember just how amazing that final Better Call Saul season felt, and how amazing that finale was when like those final payoff moments came, and it really felt like, oh, we've been building to this for so long, and everything feels in place, everything feels right, and and I'm not saying it has to be as high quality as that to work. It doesn't, but it isn't even sniffing like a half of that quality, and that's like, it's just a shame. It's just a shame. Yeah, that's the boys. This is such a bummer because like when you have an ending that feels like this, when you have like a final stretch that feels like this, I genuinely wonder actually if I do ever rewatch this show, if I just watch seasons 1, 2, and 3 and then go straight to this episode, will it feel better? Now obviously there's going to be a couple of things that the problem with that is that you can't really recommend that to a new person because too many things are like would not make sense. And like as much as nothing really important to ramp things up have happened in the last 2 seasons, or at least in this last season, Sage is there and she wasn't there before, so that would feel, you don't have to worry about Firecracker's already gone and not even mentioned this episode, so that's not a concern. but Sage is there, you wouldn't know who she is, just little things like that wouldn't quite add up, so you wouldn't be able to give this to a new person. You also wouldn't understand why Butcher has superpowers. But those are like, weird like plot things that just kind of happened that we have to kind of still have because they happened. I do wonder if it would be a much more satisfying show just watching 3 seasons and then this episode just to get your ending with Homelander and that, call it a day there. Because it just, I cannot imagine ever wanting to watch all 5 seasons again. And that is a depressing statement. That is the last thing I want to think when I end a TV show, is that rewatching it all would feel like a chore. Even though I do think it would be interesting to just sort of go back and see just how high quality those early seasons were. Maybe I've got rose-tinted glasses. Maybe they were not as amazing as I thought. Maybe I've partially also changed and my tastes have changed a little bit in some way that's kind of done this. But I don't think so, though. I do think it was better. And here, like, by the nature of this actually concluding things, obviously it's a more like satisfying episode than the last like few for sure, but it's not this like amazing like final movie quality episode that saves the season. Like I think, and I wasn't really expecting that, but it's not close to that at all. The idea that some people in the US went to a theater to watch this final episode, honestly, just feels a little bit, I don't know. I feel like it's not good enough to get that stage, and it's a shame. I hate to be such a downer. I really do. I love the first few seasons of The Boys, and over season 4 you can definitely sort of see me be enthusiastic, but it kind of dips a bit in the middle of that season, and I'm like, oh, it feels like they're kind of spinning or setting up a lot of stuff for season 5, but hopefully that means that season 5 is going to have everything it needs to be great. And that's partly why it's so annoying that season 5 has felt like a nothing season, where it's just chasing MacGuffins that didn't need to be there. At the very least, season 4 and 5 could be shortened into one 8-episode season, and like easily, not even a question. There's so much of these 2 seasons you could just condense and cut out and make it all go together very, very easily. That's me though. I don't know what else I've got left to say at this point. It's not a completely terrible episode by any stretch, just because it does, it does, like I say, it dots the I's, it crosses the T's that it needs to do, but it does that and basically no more. And it does it in the most kind of like straightforward, checklist lazy way that it could, to the point where at the end, I was just kind of shrugging my way through some of the back chunk of the episode. So there you go. That's the boys. It's over. And to be honest, I don't even know if I want to watch the spin-offs at this point. Like I think this has actively put me off watching The Boys Mexico or Vought Rising. I don't think, like, I'll probably check out the first episodes. I assume I will, just because, like, why not? But my enthusiasm for spin-offs in this universe, because I don't really want it to be a universe. I guess that's the other thing, like them poking jokes at the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all that. And we're at a point now where we've already had one spin-off that's already finished and been cancelled, and we've got 2 more spin-offs that are coming still. It all just kind of feels like it's turning into this multimedia franchise, this IP that's going to have all these parts because lots of people have been watching it. And it's feeling more hollow as all these things get announced. And yeah, I don't know. I think something that was a bit more self-contained and just finished would have been better. I think this, in many ways, has been bastardized by its own success, and like the desires of the parent company of wanting more of it, and new spin-offs and new things, and that change and that influence over the last couple of seasons was really felt, and I think it's a huge bummer. And yeah. So, that's The Boys, Season 5, Episode 8, the finale. In the early seasons of this show, when I did my top 50 TV shows like a year or two ago, I kind of had this tentatively, like, not super high, it was in like the mid-30s or even lower than that even. But it was like, oh, this is kind of dependent on how it ends. It's kind of dependent on how satisfying the ending is, and I could see it jumping up quite a bit if it nails the final season, if it nails the landing. And having now finished The Boys, it's not on my top 50 anymore. It's off the 50. Thank you for joining me. Let me know what you thought of The Boys finale in the comments. Any moments I didn't bring up, because I probably did miss some stuff. Feel free to like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch. And of course, you can support everything over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?